we're not ready to announce or share any change in policy at this time. Nadia, go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. Two questions. Since the ICJ ruling on January 26, which clearly called on Israel to avoid civilian casualties, 900 Palestinians have been killed, including women and children. So is Israel heeding the message that you sent to them in terms of the casualties? And what kind of pressure are you putting on them, trying to avoid? I mean, 900 in 10 days is a huge number.
Any number above zero, Nadia, is heartbreaking. We strongly believe that far too many civilians have lost their lives in this conflict. Not just far too many civilians, far too many women and children have lost their lives over the course of this conflict. And so at every step and at every turn, we will continue to make clear with the Israelis that international humanitarian law needs to be respected. Steps need to be taken to minimize civilian casualties. Additional steps need to be taken to minimize civilian casualties. And I have no doubt that these are the very kinds of things you're going to hear Secretary Blinken raise with his counterparts on his travels in the region right now.
Okay, you were alarmed by the settlers' violence in the West Bank to the degree that you put sanction on them. Are you equally alarmed and disturbed by the Israeli army torture of Palestinians? There is immersion pictures that's horrifying. I'm sure you've seen this picture, but one of them is basically an Israeli soldier, and this is what we know of through the social media. You must have seen this picture. This soldier has been identified as, his name is Yussi Gamzu, and he is from the Nahal Brigade. This is a clear violation of international law, of the Geneva Convention, etc. So just equally as much as the violence of the settlers, this is the violence of an Israeli soldiers. This is an Israeli army that's an allied of the United States. This is acceptable to you? And what you do to hold these people accountable? This is what we know from the social media. The guy himself published this picture. Imagine the things that we don't know.
Thanks for your question, Nadia. So first, as it relates to our sanctions, you're absolutely right. Peaceability and security in the West Bank is of utmost importance to us, and those participating in activities or actions that detract from that make the West Bank more destabilizing and risk the security situation, that is of course of great concern to us, and that's why you saw the United States take appropriate action last week. In relation to the image that you shared, I've not seen that image specifically, but obviously it is it's deeply troubling. I have no knowledge or information as it relates to the circumstances surrounding that incident, and I will leave it to the IDF to speak to those specific situations, but we have been clear to them that the respect for basic human rights, the respect for humanitarian law needs to be respected, and those who do not comply with that need to be held accountable.
So if I share this information with you, would you raise it with the Israelis? I'm happy to raise it.
I'm not going to get into specific situations here, Nadia. This is not a operation that the United States is conducting. But when it comes to the impact on civilians, the treatment of civilians, the things that we see, not just in social media, but elsewhere, in our conversations with people on the ground, in our assessments with things on the ground, we raise those issues with the Israelis, and will continue to do so.
Let's follow up.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
You sanction these four individuals. The ideological leadership of these individuals and of all of those people, Kahanis basically, who want the forcible expulsion of Palestinians, sit at the highest levels of the Israeli government. The finance minister, the national security minister. There's a fundamental contradiction, isn't there, in your policy, because you're sanctioning the followers, but you're backing the leaders.
We don't back any leader or don't back leader of any government. That's not our approach to this. This is an Israeli government that we are working with, and the makeup of any cabinet and any government is a sovereign decision for that government to do. That's not something that the United States has a say or a sway in. And when we have seen rhetoric from some of these ministers, from some of these individuals that make up this cabinet, when we see rhetoric from any member of this particular Israeli cabinet that we think is not just a distraction, but an incitement or something that brings us further away from a two-state solution or brings us further away from peace and stability in the region, we've not hesitated to say so.
But it's not just rhetoric, because arms transfers go, for example, to the Israeli border police. That is a department controlled by the national security minister. Those border forces operate in East Jerusalem, in the West Bank. Often, rights groups will say hand in glove with these people that are smashing up Palestinian property. So there is an arms transfer to the very department, funded by the US taxpayer, of one of these leaders in terms of the national security minister who controls the border police.
And with every transfer of any U.S. asset, we of course have been clear that any end user needs to comply with humanitarian law, and those who are not should be held accountable.
But are you checking that in each case?
We are there are a number of vectors and lines of work that lead into the work we do to assess situations and circumstances on the ground to make sure that basic humanitarian rights are being protected and followed. Willie, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just wondering, Secretary Blinken